So you want to study like a Japanese student? In most of the YouTube videos, you're told that it takes waking up at 5 a.m., studying for 12 hours straight, using flashcards for everything, and basically having no life outside of your textbooks to become successful. But what you actually become is burned out, miserable, and surprisingly, not even that much smarter. That's not even a joke. But on the bright side, when you have a mental breakdown from exhaustion, you can write about it in perfect grammatical Japanese in your Anki flashcards. If you haven't guessed by the title, studying like a Japanese student is actually wrong for most of us, even if you think you need extreme discipline to succeed. If you compare yourself to every other successful student, you'll find that most of them aren't sacrificing their entire existence just to get good grades. But before we continue, build your personalized study system that works, I'm collecting donations in the form of likes and subscribes to fund my next video, where I'll show you how I created a study system that got me straight A's while still having time for friends, sleep, and honestly, way too much time on TikTok. When people see viral TikToks about Japanese study methods, they immediately think, this is why they're so smart. I need to do exactly what they do. But what those aesthetic study vlogs don't show you is the mental health crisis, the crushing pressure, and the fact that memorizing facts isn't the same as actually understanding something. Look, I'm not saying Japanese students aren't impressive, they absolutely are, but blindly copying their methods without understanding the cultural context and the massive downsides is like copying someone's workout routine without considering your own body type, goals, or the fact that they might be on steroids. When people like you and me say we want to study better, it means a bunch of things. We want to actually understand and remember the material, we want to get good grades without destroying our mental health, we want to be efficient with our time so we can, actually have a life, and lastly, we want to develop skills that will actually help us in the real world, not just on standardized tests. The problem is most advice about Japanese study methods is so romanticized and idealized that even if it works in theory, the only people who could actually follow it are robots or people who have literally nothing else in their lives. And if you instead look for specific advice that you can actually try right now, this is what you get: use active recall on everything, do the Pomodoro technique religiously, make Anki flashcards for every single fact, practice Kaizen for continuous improvement, take meticulous notes, and immerse yourself completely in your studies. These things sound good, but at some point, you have to, actually be a human being with emotions, relationships, and interests outside of school. Let's break down why blindly adopting these methods is actually wrong for most American students. First, there's the perfectionism problem. Japanese study culture often emphasizes flawlessness. Every note must be perfect, every flashcard reviewed exactly on schedule, every practice problem solved without mistakes. But this level of perfectionism doesn't account for the fact that failure and mistakes are actually crucial parts of learning. Perfectionism doesn't lead to better results, it leads to anxiety, procrastination, and burning out before you even get started. Then there's the time issue. These methods often require insane amounts of time that most American students simply don't have between part-time jobs, extracurriculars, family responsibilities, and trying to maintain some semblance of a social life. When someone tells you to study 10 hours a day like Japanese students, they're not considering that many Japanese students don't have the same financial pressures forcing them to work while studying. The main thing you need to do is adopt a more balanced, personalized approach that actually fits your life and brain. What kind of approach? It depends. If you're struggling with burnout, prioritizing well-being and breaks is essential. If you're finding yourself memorizing facts without understanding them, focusing on deep learning instead of just flashcards is the way to go. But most people go straight for the most extreme version of these techniques, which is like trying to run a marathon when you've never even jogged around the block. The key is to take the useful parts of these methods while leaving behind the toxic elements. For example, using spaced repetition can be incredibly helpful for memorization, but you don't need to turn your entire life into a never-ending flashcard review. Instead of making Anki cards for literally everything, focus on creating cards for the most important concepts, the ones you actually struggle with. This way, you'll still get 80% of the benefits with only 20% of the effort. Let's talk about the Pomodoro technique. Yes, working in focused bursts can be effective, but rigidly sticking to 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off might not work for everyone. For some subjects, you need to get into a flow state that lasts longer than 25 minutes. For others, even 25 minutes might be too long to maintain focus. The trick is to be flexible, maybe use 45-minute sessions for subjects you enjoy, and 15-minute sessions for ones you struggle with. Active recall is amazing for strengthening memory, but it's not so great when you're just starting to learn something. Trying to recall information you barely understand is just frustrating. Instead, make sure you have a solid foundation of understanding before testing yourself. And when you do test yourself, focus on applying concepts to new situations, not just regurgitating facts. Now, how do you actually implement a more balanced approach? It's actually pretty straightforward. You don't have to either fully embrace or completely reject Japanese study methods. You can take what works and modify the rest. Let's start with the perfectionism issue. Instead of aiming for perfect notes, perfect flashcards, and perfect test scores, aim for progress. Set realistic goals based on where you are now, not where some idealized Japanese student might be. Break down larger tasks into smaller steps, and celebrate your progress along the way. Accept that, good enough, is often sufficient. Getting that assignment to 80% quality and actually turning it in is infinitely better than endlessly perfecting it and missing the deadline. Next, let's address the overworking problem. Instead of studying until your eyes bleed, incorporate regular breaks and self-care into your routine. Use a modified Pomodoro technique that actually suits your attention span and energy levels. Listen to your body. If you're mentally fatigued, take a longer break. Prioritize activities that recharge you, like exercise, meditation, or just hanging out with friends. Focus on quality study sessions with full attention, rather than endless hours of half-hearted work while scrolling TikTok at the same time. For deeper learning, move beyond just memorization. Strive for conceptual understanding by teaching the material to someone else, even if that someone is just a rubber duck on your desk. Use real-world examples to connect abstract concepts to situations you actually care about. Summarize key points in your own words after reading or watching content. This approach helps you focus on application and critical thinking rather than just memorizing random facts that you'll forget after the test. Let's talk about study methods. While spaced repetition tools like Anki can be helpful, don't over-rely on them. Mix in other methods like mind maps for visual connections, discussion groups to gain different perspectives, and practice tests to simulate the actual exam environment. Different subjects often require different approaches. Math might benefit from lots of practice problems, while history might need more conceptual connections and timelines. One of the most toxic aspects of Japanese study culture is the extreme competition. Instead of comparing yourself to others, focus on your own growth and improvement. Track your own progress, and aim to be better than you were yesterday, not better than everyone else in the class. Foster a growth mindset where effort and persistence, rather than natural intelligence, lead to success. Now I know some of you are thinking, but what about all those Japanese students who get perfect test scores? Shouldn't I just do what they do? Here's the thing. Many Japanese students are actually suffering under this system. Japan has some of the highest rates of student depression and anxiety in the developed world. And despite all those hours of studying, when these students get to university or the workplace, many struggle with critical thinking, creativity, and independent problem solving because they've been trained to memorize, not to think. Plus, there's a massive cultural difference here. In Japan, there's an entire society built around this academic pressure, from cram schools to family expectations. When you try to adopt these methods in isolation, without the surrounding support system, it's like trying to grow a tropical plant in the Arctic. It's just not going to work the same way. Let's get even more practical. Here are some specific ways to modify Japanese study techniques to actually work for your life. For active recall, instead of drilling yourself on facts you barely know, try the closed book, open book method. First, Try to write down everything you remember about a topic without looking at your notes, closed book. Then, check your notes, open book, to see what you missed. Focus on understanding those gaps, not beating yourself up about them. This gives you the benefits of active recall without the frustration. For Pomodoro, personalize it completely. Maybe you work better with 30-minute sessions and 10-minute breaks. Maybe you need a longer 15-minute break after every hour. The point is to work with your brain's natural attention cycles, not force yourself into someone else's system. And for subjects you really enjoy, you might find you can focus for much longer periods. Don't interrupt a productive flow state just because a timer went off. For spaced repetition, be selective. Don't try to Anki FY your entire textbook. Focus on the most important 20% of the content, the big concepts, the tricky formulas, the key terms that keep showing up. For everything else, trust that your regular study sessions and assignments will provide enough repetition. This saves you hours of flashcard creation time that you can use for actually understanding the material. For note-taking, forget about those perfect, color-coded notes you see on Instagram. Instead, focus on notes that work for your brain. Maybe that's mind maps, maybe it's bullet points, maybe it's voice recordings that you can listen to later. The point is to process the information in a way that helps you specifically, not to create art for social media. But the most important modification is adding something that traditional Japanese study methods often lack: social learning. Humans are social creatures, and we learn better together. Form study groups, explain concepts to friends, debate ideas, teach others what you've learned. This not only improves your understanding but makes learning more enjoyable and sustainable. Remember, the goal isn't to study the most hours or to have the prettiest notes or the most flashcards. The goal is to actually learn in a way that works for your brain, your life, and your future goals. A study method that makes you miserable isn't sustainable, no matter how effective it looks on paper. Studying like a Japanese student might seem like the answer to academic success, but the truth is, a more balanced, personalized approach will yield better results in the long run. The S-tier approach isn't copying someone else's system, it's building your own system that works with your brain, your schedule, and your life. The most successful students aren't necessarily the ones who study the longest or use the most flashcards, they're the ones who find sustainable methods that they can actually stick with over time. They're the ones who understand the material deeply enough to apply it in new situations, not just regurgitate it on a test. They're the ones who maintain their mental health, their relationships, and their joy in learning. So take what works from Japanese study methods, the emphasis on consistent practice, the focus on active recall, the systematic approach to review, but leave behind the toxic perfectionism, the extreme competition, and the unsustainable time commitments. Create a system that works for you, not against you. But before you go off to build your personalized study system, I'm collecting donations in the form of likes and subscribes to fund my next video where I'll show you how I created a study system that got me straight A's while still having time for friends, sleep, and honestly, way too much time on TikTok. Because that's what real productivity looks like, not studying 12 hours a day, but getting more done in less time so you can actually enjoy your life.